Hello, I'm Lady Loy, and you'll find me on Lovers Rock Radio every Friday, 7 till 9 on Lovers Rock Radio, and every Saturday, 7 till 9 on The Roller Coaster Show. But I'm speaking to you today as a vlogger, just sharing information. Today it's about relationships, why sometimes a relationship ends suddenly and you don't have a clue why it ended. So, there is a particular kind of relationship ending that leaves people confused rather than devastated. It doesn't come with shouting or betrayal or a dramatic rupture. Instead, it ends quietly, almost politely, and that quietness is what lingers. People replay it not because it was explosive, but because it didn't make sense. They're left wondering how something that required so much emotional labour could end with so little confrontation. Often these relationships don't look unhealthy on the surface. There may be kindness, routine, shared domestic life, even moments of warmth. But underneath, something more subtle is happening. Something that slowly drains one person while remaining largely invisible to the other. In many cases, one partner becomes the emotional stabilizer, not through any explicit agreement, but through circumstance and temperament. They hold the structure financially, practically, and emotionally, while the other leans. The leaning may be quiet, even polite. It may show up as hint, wishes, unspoken expectations, not demands exactly, more like hopes placed gently into the space, waiting to see whether someone else will pick them up. What keeps these dynamics going is often not romance, but responsibility. A sense of duty, a reluctance to cause harm, a belief that accommodation is simply what adult relationships require. After all, most households make room for others, partners, children, family members. Very few people live only for themselves. So the slow erosion of self is rationalized as generosity, patience, or commitment. What isn't always recognised, at least not at first, is the difference between accommodation and enclosure. Accommodation allows space, enclosure restricts it. In enclosed dynamics, one person's inner life becomes subject to constant attention. Movements are noticed, silences are questioned, emotional neutrality is treated as a problem that needs resolving. Over time, this creates a quiet pressure to account for oneself, to explain moods, to justify stillness, to perform reassurance. Where am I? This kind of environment doesn't always produce overt conflict. In fact, it often produces compliance. The person carrying the weight grows quieter, less expressive, more inward. Self-care diminishes, creative energy narrows. What remains are the few spaces where autonomy is still intact. Moments of solitude, creative work, or public-facing roles where emotional monitoring doesn't reach. Eventually, something has to be named. And when it is named calmly, without accusation or drama, it can provoke a reaction far stronger than any argument would. That's because arguments for many people still signal engagement. They reassure the anxious system that the bond is alive. Calm honesty does something else entirely. It states an internal truth without asking for negotiation. It introduces uncertainty without cushioning it. And for someone whose sense of safety depends on another person's emotional availability, that can feel intolerable. In those moments, people often act decisively, not because they are certain, but because certainty feels safer than sitting in ambiguity. Leaving becomes a way to restore control, to avoid the vulnerability of being slowly seen or slowly disengaged from. What complicates matters further is how often intensity is mistaken for intimacy, both in private life and the wider culture. We are surrounded by stories that equate speed with sincerity. Quick commitments, strong declarations, emotional urgency are celebrated as evidence of knowing what one wants. Meanwhile, hesitation, reflection, and pacing are framed as uncertainty or avoidance. But intensity is not the same as intimacy. Intensity is fast, it is legible, it feels decisive. Intimacy, by contrast, unfolds slowly, it tolerates not knowing, it develops through observation, consistency, and time. One is driven by urgency, the other by integration. Many people, particularly those who have experienced instability, rejection, or emotional deprivation, confuse the relief of intensity with the depth of intimacy. The rush feels grounding, it soothes anxiety. It offers immediate reassurance, but that relief is often temporary because it bypasses the work of building a relationship that can hold difference, distance, and autonomy. This is where freedom becomes a fault line. For some people, a partner's independence feels neutral, even attractive. It signals wholeness. For others, especially those with unresolved insecurity, that same independence can feel threatening. Emotional sovereignty is misread as distance. Autonomy is experienced as withdrawal. Slowness is interpreted as withholding. In these cases, closeness becomes entangled with control. Possessiveness masquerades as devotion. The desire to be chosen turns into a need to secure, monitor, or collapse space, not out of malice, but out of fear. Understanding this dynamic doesn't require assigning blame. It does, however, require clarity. Compassion for someone's history does not obligate self-erasure. Empathy does not require surrendering freedom. One of the most important distinctions people come to make is this. Money, effort, and practicality are external. They can be given, adjusted, recovered. Freedom is internal. When freedom is constrained, when one can no longer be quiet, neutral, or unobserved, the cost accumulates silently. And when that freedom is restored, the relief is immediate and telling. Relief in this sense is data. Another important insight is that pacing is not a flaw. Slowness is not avoidance. Taking time to trust is not a provocation. Healthy, regulated people are not threatened by gradual intimacy. They do not become possessive in response to autonomy. In fact, autonomy tends to reveal who is capable of mutuality and who is seeking regulation through another person. This is where the idea of porosity with structure becomes essential. Porosity means openness, the ability to be touched, influenced, affected. Structure means self-definition, the ability to remain oneself while connected. Together they describe intimacy without enclosure, connection without collapse. What many people are ultimately seeking is not to be adored or consumed, but to be met, to be seen without being monitored, to be loved without being managed, to be close without shrinking. And perhaps the quiet truth beneath all of this is that intimacy, worth having, does not rush, does not cling, and does not demand the forfeiting of freedom. It grows at a pace that allows both people to remain whole. That kind of intimacy may be less dramatic, it may be quieter, but it leaves people more themselves, not less. And that is how you know it's real. This piece reflects common relational patterns. This piece reflects common relational patterns observed across many contexts. It's not intended as a diagnosis of individuals or groups, but as an exploration of how attachment, insecurity, and cultural narratives about love can shape intimacy. The intention is understanding, discernment, and preservation of inner freedom. So, if you are in a situation where somebody leaves suddenly, don't take it personally. There might be a lot going on. That person may feel fragile, may feel needs stability, and feels as though he's exhausted you or she's exhausted you so much that you cannot offer any more to them. So they need to find somewhere else where they can feel stabilized. So that's all I've got to say. And if you are that person, you'll probably be quite relieved that you've reached a place where you can now relax and be free in mind, body, and soul. And that's all I've got to say. Lady Loy, Over and out.